Thank you guys for coming to my talk show. I'm going to start with Paris because we're here at the hallowed DGA. You know, I have loved Paris's work for a long time. The great thing about this panel, with the exception of Rodney, is I've worked with this group of people for many, many, many years, and we all have an interesting shorthand. I first met Paris, I think back in 2008, when we were starting Glee. And I remember calling you up and I said, please help me, and you came and did many wonderful episodes, Emmy-nominated episodes. And this was a case where, this was a show that I have been thinking about and researching probably for 10 years. So when we finally got the go-ahead to make it, I was very excited. And Paris was one of the first people that I called when we were coming up with the directors for the show, and this was the episode that I always had in mind for Paris. It ended up being amazing, and I think it's not only one of the best episodes of the year, but it's also one of the best episodes that I've ever had in my 25-year-long career. I just loved it, and I was proud of it. Thank you. So I called Paris, and Paris, I called you, and I think the first thing I said to you was, are you sitting down? I have something special for you. I think those were my words. And then we sent you the script. So can you talk about when you read it?
Well, what even before that, when you called me and said Dahmer, I said, no.
Maybe then I said, wait a beat.
First, he called me about American Horror Story. Let's just talk amongst us, okay? American Horror Story over the years, and I'm so super scared of stuff in general. So
That's right, you did pass on that.
I never wanted to do American Horror Story, so he said Dahmer, and I said, you must think I'm crazy. But then he told me the story, which I did not know, of Tony Hughes, this gay deaf blind man who, you know, Dahmer had kind of a relationship with, and like Ryan, I got sucked into it, and he's so good at casting, as you can see, he cast me to do this episode. And as I got into it and as I read the script, I saw why, because I so identified with everything, everything except Jeffrey Dahmer, which was fine. But with all of the people, with their life, with the striving, with the gay-black culture at that time, and I learned about the deaf culture, which I was completely blown away by and fell in love with as well. I'd done episodes with deaf actors before, but I had never gotten immersed the way Rodney and Michael Spady and the company brought me into it. And that was a revelation. So I'm eternally grateful to you and to David for writing this in the first place, and then for casting me, because you have a genius for casting.
Yeah, I'll take credit for that. I just knew that you would. It was a very research-heavy episode, and I know that you love that, and I knew that you would attack that from all sides. One of my favorite scenes, again, that I'm the most proud of in my career, is in this episode, and it's a scene where 3 gay deaf men are sitting in a diner talking about their lives and their dreams.
Mine
and
too.
It's very long, and we you know, usually in the editing, sometimes you bring something down. I remember the first time I saw it, my instinct was like, well, we're not changing a word of that scene, because it was so powerful, and I had never seen anything like that, and I think David wrote it so beautifully. Can you talk about that day when you were directing that scene?
Well, it was these guys. I mean, what we did, just, you know, we're being honest here, right? Because we have a lot of people who want to know the inside. Is we rehearsed before then, and what happened, we have a translator and we have an interpreter. And our translator really helped us get the language to be what these deaf people would say in this real time, 1991. And Rodney and Jared and Michael, who were the other two who played Rico and Rufus, contributed to that process with David. And we went back and forth and shaped it to really be what they would say, really. So it did deviate from the script, but it just built on it to be even more authentic. And I thank you, all of you, and Tanase and everyone who was there for just allowing that process to make that scene more organic. So they were just, you know, bitches talking by the end of it, which I think makes it so wonderful. It is actually my favorite scene in the episode too, because it's just silent for that time and you just watch them, and I hadn't had that experience before. I hadn't had that experience of seeing myself in them. And that to me was just elevating this whole, that's the reason why I make these motion pictures, is I just want to find another world and learn about it and embrace it. And that was one of those times when I said, holy hell, we're just doing this. It took a long time to shoot it. I remember, Rodney, didn't it take That was a long night in Antonio's Pizza on Ventura, and it was hot, but it was so much fun. It was so much fun.
And that was your favorite scene. What, as a director, was your most difficult scene?
The last scene, and Evan can talk about that. For me, first I'm repulsed by it. So, and I could see, I watched the audience too. It's really hard to take. And after all the meetings about what the meat should be, and looking at all these different samples of meat, and just going through the directorial process like it was nothing, when it came to be the day, I was freaked out by it. I'll just be honest. I'm just freaked out by it. And so what we did with Evan is we just embraced the fact that he was trying to hold on to this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying to hold on to this guy. And I tried to be as clinical as possible with the shooting, those, sort of Food Network from the top shots. And Evan was completely cool, and you could talk about this. We didn't show much of his face until the end of that.
Right.
You saw his hands, you saw what he was doing, you saw his hands shake a little bit as he approached the meat, and all that told the story, and it was great. And then finally we got through it, and I said, oh, the scene's done.
Right.
And I was so glad.
That was very rough, but it's sort of, you had to show that. You had to do that in this episode. But the interesting thing about the show, we haven't really talked about it. We haven't done a lot of press for this show. We've kind of waited. We wanted people to discover it and absorb it and talk about it themselves before we chimed in. Like I said, it's something that we researched for a very long time. And we, over the course of the 3.5 years when we were really writing it, working on it, we reached out to around 20 of the victims' families and friends, trying to get input, trying to talk to people, and not a single person responded to us in that process. So we relied very, very heavily, and David can contest to this, on an incredible group of researchers who, I don't even know how they found a lot of this stuff, but it was just like a night and day effort to us trying to uncover the truths of these people. And it was a story that I was obsessed with for a very long time. And we'll talk about the casting now, because all three of these actors had an incredible road to get here. Evan, I've known since I believe you were at the end of your teenage years. I cast him in the first season of American Horror Story, and I thought he was great, but it was really because he looked like Jessica Lange. And I thought, well, it'll be fine. He looks like Jessica. And then we showed up on that first scene, and it was like, wait, he can do that? And then we went forward and retooled the season for his talent. It's a very interesting thing, this show, because Evan and I had worked together on a horror story for many, many, many years. And then we took a break, and he went off to do Mayor of Easttown, for which he won the Emmy Award. And it's so incredible in that show. And he kept saying to me, I really want to play somebody normal. I really want to be a normal, I want to do a rom-com. So when we started working on Dahmer, we had my long-term casting person, Eric Dawson, and I believe we auditioned over 100 people for this role. And we never felt that we had it. So I went to Evan and I said, remember me? Hi. And he was like, oh God, oh no. But he read it, and he called me the next day, and he said, it's so challenging, it's so difficult, that I kind of have to say yes to it, even though I'm terrified of it. So I'm very grateful for my old friend Evan for saying yes to this part. And the thrilling thing for me is in the casting of it, to the making of it, to people seeing of it. I've been reading stuff about Evan Peters now that describes him as his generation's Robert De Niro, and I just wanted to say I always knew it, and I'm so proud of you. And
thanks, Ron.
I love that people are seeing you in this way that I have always seen you from when you were a tiny wee tot. But let's talk about this part, because it was hard, and you had a great responsibility in this part. So can you talk about your research and how you did it?
Yeah, I mean, it really just, it started with that first video you wanted me to watch. You said, watch the Dateline interview with Stone Phillips. So I watched that, and I was really transfixed by how he spoke about what he did, and how there was a confusion about why he even wanted to do what he did, and how he felt it was wrong. And I think I was interested in researching the psychology behind that. And quickly dove in, reading books about him, articles, all of the psychology reports, confessions, timelines, all those things, in an attempt to try to understand why he did what he did, and the struggle that he had with it. So I did that, and then the physicality of it, which I knew was going to be so hard. He has a lot of external things, from the way that he walks, and doesn't move his arms when he walks, and how he talks. And so I did a lot of research on watching him and seeing how he moved, and working with weights on my arms, wearing wardrobe, all sorts of things that I would carry with me throughout the day to try to stay in it so it would be second nature. Then I created a 45-minute audio composite, which I listened to every day to try to get his dialect and how he spoke, and really try to understand why he did what he did, or what his mindset was.
Right. Well, that's something that we talked a lot in the making of it, is we weren't so much interested in Jeffrey Dahmer, the person, but what made him the monster that he became. We talked a lot about that this show really was about, and we talked about it all the time, it's really about white privilege, it's about systemic racism, it's about homophobia. But it's interesting you talking about the character, because backstage, when you walk into these things, you're like, hey, old friend, and you and Niecy were talking, and she remarked to us that when you were filming, she didn't really know you. Niecy, can you talk about that?
Hello. Can you hear me? Thank you, Evan. Hello. I was saying backstage, people often ask me, well, what is Evan Peters like? What was it like to work with him? And I told Evan backstage, I said, my answer is, I don't really know Evan. I didn't get to know Evan because Evan stayed in his process. So, being his, nosy neighbor, and a thorn in his flesh, we didn't really get to connect. I think maybe we said good morning twice, and that was because I forced it on you. I said good morning, Evan, and you Jeffrey Dahmered me. And I said good morning, Evan. And then I realized stay in my lane, because I did not want to upset your process and what you needed to do to stay where you needed to stay.
I will say working with you was amazing, because you were so warm and lovely. And tell them what your grandmother said. And I really took that to heart. That was awesome.
There was one time we were talking on set, and it seemed like Evan was struggling. I don't know if we were in the van on the way somewhere. I don't know where we were going, but I said, Evan, my grandmother always say, hang tough till you get enough. And when you get enough, still hang tough. He said he never forgot it.
Also, the interesting thing about Niecy, I would like to say, is I've known and loved and worked with Niecy for 25 years. I cast her in the very first show that I did, a show called Popular. She played a lobster, a comic masterpiece turn, and we were both kind of starting out at that time. And I just loved Niecy, and I'm so proud of where she is now. To get this show, she also was an amazing show called Rookie Feds. And what a path, and what an amazing time for you. Can you talk about how you feel? Because I always thought Niecy was hilarious, but I always said to her, you are a great dramatic actress. You are, and I think we all know that now. But can you talk about how are you feeling about everything?
First of all, I'll say thank you, because a lot of people, when I started off, did not give me that grace. They found me when I was funny, because that's where I entered the business, and they said, you have a lane. And then there were a few who said, no, I believe you when you say you can do more. So I want to thank you for that. And it is a very, I guess you want to say, charming time, in that I get to taste a lot of different disciplines right now. And a lot of people don't know this, but I would go from the tears and the anguish and the pain of not being heard as Glenda Cleveland, and then put on my booty and baby hair and drive across town and go do Reno 911. So, and I was doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I can just tell you that that part of my life became a gift, because this part, to carry that pain, is not easy. Because I feel like as an actor, you put on whoever you play for such a time. And to the weight of that cost me emotionally, but to be able to then go and play with my friends on Reno 911, it was like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how many people know, but my daughter in the Dahmer series, Sandra, was played by my real life daughter, Dia, and she was another a breath of fresh air on set, and it was good to have her there, because kids are, they don't know, you know what I mean? And I'm sitting in the corner just, trying to feel all the things Glenda was feeling. And she's like, Mom, you want to come do this TikTok real quick? And I was just, thank God for the babies. But I'm in a very, very sweet place. I shared this time with the greatest love of my life, Jessica Betts, and it's wonderful to have the acknowledgement from my peers and the success, but it's even better to have someone to share it with. And I love you.
Oh, good. So I want to talk about the casting of Tony Hughes. It was, interestingly enough, Glenda was written for Niecy. I called her very early on, and I said, we're working on this, and you're going to play this, and I hope you love it. And I think she thought I was crazy, but you were like, okay.
Because you've always had me at hello. You know that.
Well, that's very sweet.
It's true.
Thank you. When we were working on the Tony part, it was a difficult part. I think we looked at close to 75 actors, maybe closer to 100, to be honest. We really did do a nationwide search. So I wanted to ask Ronnie here, what was the process like for you in being cast? How did you find out about the show? How did you work with Evan and Paris? What was that like?
So I did my first show, Deaf You, on Netflix. Then I told my friend, Nal DeMarco, I let him know I'm serious about becoming an actor. And then he showed me the casting call for this. I saw, and I was like, all right, is this for real? And I was like, let me go ahead and do it. And I auditioned. I didn't expect to get the part, honestly.
You're wonderful in it. Really beautiful in it. There are a lot of, I think, amazing episodes in this series, but this is the one that really seems to get people. We were always talking about how difficult it was and how devastating it was. I love this episode. I know Evan loves this episode. We talked about it a lot. The reason I think it's so wonderfully constructed by David and Janet, but I love that you're with this guy for 16, 17 minutes, and it's just about his life and how beautiful and difficult his life is and how much he tries, and he's so optimistic. And I think that, Paris, can you talk about that? And then you see Evan at like minute 17 or something at the bar, and it's absolutely, you forget you're watching a show about Jeffrey Dahmer until there he is. Can you talk about the optimism of Tony? We talked about that a lot in making it.
I just want to talk about Rodney just as a lead up to that, because he likes to be embarrassed by me. So when I read it, I said, this is going to hinge on who's that guy, because this is truly a story of the victims, which is what we really want this show to be about. We really want this show to be about, celebrating the victims and not so much, the devil, basically. So I said, it's going to hinge on that, and Brian and company said, we already have the guy. By the time I got there, they had already cast Rodney. So then I was super afraid, and then I got to watch Deaf You, and then I was super afraid, because those of you who know Deaf You, that character is nothing like Tony, the character who is himself. It's nothing like Tony, so I got really worried. So I got on a Zoom with Rodney, and suddenly when you see him in real life, you realize that he has all the qualities that he needed to have. It was really a God thing. He was put in this place with all of the qualities, and you saw it on the screen, with the charm and with the electricity and with the faith and with that optimism. That was who he was. And so my job on the set, along with just working with Evan, is you have two actors who are working in very different styles, is to make sure it was comfortable for the both of them. And Rodney just came to play. Rodney was there ready to go every day, try what I would suggest, no ego, just threw himself into it. And honestly, I didn't have to suggest a lot except just do this, sometimes the way Rodney would do it. And that charm just came through. And so when you have it, you have it. And he definitely had it. And I think the episode works in large part because of, the love of Rodney Burford just coming through, and we get sucked in, and we just are, hoping that he escapes, and we're just with him. And that's what we want the show to be about. We really want it to be about celebrating these victims. And when Rodney writes, or when Tony writes, "I won't disappear," on that last card, that's what this show is about. It's about making sure these people are not erased by history, and that they have a place, and that they're recognized, and that they were important, and that they lived full lives, and they came from all sorts of different places, but they were real people. They weren't just numbers. They weren't just pictures on, billboards and telephone poles. They were real people with loving families that you saw, breathing, living, hoping. That's what we wanted it to be about. And because of Rodney, I think it really comes to the fore that potential of the series came together. So I thank you for that.
And it's also interesting from what Paris says, we were always talking about centering the victims, always. And Nisi, you and I talked about how, people really don't maybe see it this way or talk about it this way, but Glenda was a victim as well.
I absolutely believe that. She, to me, especially when you think about how she suffered, it is difficult. If you've ever been in life and not been believed, and you knew you were telling the truth, and her truth was attached to people's lives being lost. Because had she been believed when she first spoke out, had she been a white woman, had the victims been anything other than what they were, had the police not been racist, had they not been homophobic, so many parts played into her being victimized over and over and over again. Not only are you bearing witness to people coming in and not coming out, but then you're not heard by the police and being told that you're using 911 in the wrong way. And then even on the other side of it, well, where is what you promised? Where is the park? Where is the memorial? Where
Why do you think why isn't there a park? Why do you think that is? A memorial for the victims. We've talked about that, but why do you think the city cannot get that together?
Because I think that memorial would make them have to own what they did. It would make you have to own your mistake. And then there is a monument to that, to your failure. And that's why I think it's not there.
Yeah, I've been very interested in that, and I've even beautifully said. I think there should be a park. I think there should be a memorial to the victims, and I haven't talked about this, but anything that we could do to get that happen, I would even be happy to pay for it myself. I do think there should be something, and we're trying to get a hold of the right people to talk about that. I think there's some resistance because they think the park would attract people who are interested in paying homage to the macabre, maybe the wrong set, but I think something should be done. I think we've all talked about that. One of my last questions here, I wanted to ask Evan first and then the rest of the group. This show has become the biggest, I don't like to use the word hit, but it's become a phenomenon all over the world. I think sometime in the next 10 days, it will pass 1 billion hours streamed, which is an incredible, really an unbelievable number. And it's happened in 5 weeks. I mean, it's been a lot of attention and a lot of commentary and a lot of people talking about it. And Evan, when you were making it, of course, and playing this part, you never probably thought that this would become what it became in the culture.
No, definitely not.
What were you thinking it was going to be?
I don't know. I mean, I knew the scripts were special. I knew that everybody was on the same page with the message we were trying to relay, but I don't know. Why do you think it was?
I thought about that a lot because I was absolutely shocked, and I think we've all had these conversations like, what the hell is happening? Like, you can never understand something like this hitting at the moment that it did. I think there's a couple of reasons. For me, at least what I was hearing from people, and I'm interested in you guys talking about it too, is I think it's a place it's such a dark, anxious time, and I think it's a place for people to put their anxiety in some way. That's part of the equation. I think people are interested in right now, particularly after COVID, in talking about mental health. I think they're interested in talking about abuse. I think all of those things have been in the water in terms of what I've been hearing from audiences' feedback. Paris, what do you think is happening here in the culture?
I'm with Evan. I just don't know what's happening. I do know that, despite what you may have heard, it was one of the most difficult shows to do in one of the best environments. And I know that seems odd, but because Evan and Nisi and Rodney and the cast were working at such a high level and the scripts were so good, we were all kind of mesmerized. You've been on those sets where the crew is just watching, the actors work and going, holy hell, this is like, I'm watching amazing things happening. And we sort of had that every day. And we had health professionals, and there were some days that I went home crying, absolutely, because of just everything that we had been through. But we had a great DGA team with Cynthia Potash and our second ADs, and they were taking care of the set. And they were taking care of people, and they were making sure people were listened to and were heard. And you had COVID on top of all that. So I do know that it was kind of lightning in a bottle for people professionally that are really working at a very high level. And with that entire crew kind of behind them, just getting through this incredibly dark material with some semblance of love and humanity and support for each other. And, I use Evan again as an example. Evan working with Rodney, he really took care of him. I've been on shows, I'll just be honest, where, number one in the call sheet has an actor that's not experienced, and they make it more difficult for them to do their job. But Evan was just the opposite. He was caring, and you can talk about this, Rod. He just took care of him in that process, and the crew saw that, and that affected how we did the show. So I think as we all got together to do it, I don't know why the world is responding so much, but I do know the people in that bubble, those 100 people who made it, really responded, and some of them are here today, that they were making something super creepy, but super special.
Well said. Nisi.
I was just gonna say that I do co-sign. I have no idea how this became a phenomenon, but what I do hope is that wherever her spirit lives in the universe, that Glenda Cleveland finally feels heard. That is what I do hope.
And Rodney, do you have an opinion about episode 6? Why this episode in particular touched people so deeply?
I think it was because it was different. If you watch all of the episodes prior, you just see Jeff was just killing people left and right with no feelings, no remorse. But then, however, Tony shows up. He's deaf, he's black, and like all odds are against him. But Jeff took a liking to him compared to the other people. And they created a connection that felt like they were on the same level. And it seemed like Like watching episode 6, it was just like witnessing greatness because I was with great actors, you know, Niecy and Evan and Paris directing. Everyone supported me. And so seeing that reflect on Netflix was beautiful.
Can I fangirl for a moment? I just have to fangirl for one moment because your performance was so beautiful and so unexpected. I didn't know what to expect, but and even though, what's the episode? Glenda's episode is 7?
7.
Even though Glenda's episode is 7, my better half said that your episode was her favorite. So it was just absolutely beautiful, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you guys for being here, to our wonderful casting director. And thank you for watching and supporting us. Have a great night.